Okay, got a minute or so past. I think we can probably get going now. So the title of this session is Fixed Wireless Fiber in the Future, and we're going to talk a bit about the evolution that's happening across the wider ISP industry, but of course, especially with fixed wireless and migration or not to fiber, as we're going to discuss. So today with us, we have a couple of operators who have a bunch of experience in multi-access networks. Jason Pond, CEO of Grizzly Broadband, started in fixed wireless, moved, I believe, pretty heavily into fiber now. And Adair Winter, VP and co-owner of AW Broadband, who I believe, again, started in fixed wireless, has some cable plant as well. Maybe we're going to talk a little bit about that and fiber as well. So these guys are each going to talk a little bit about their story, their evolution, where they see the industry going, a little bit of future predictions. And then we're going to have a discussion at the end. So as we go, please kind of keep your questions. You can drop them in the sidebar chat if you'd like. And then when we get to the discussion, we'll just start going through those items and whatever else comes, I guess, to our minds as we go through. So with that, I'm just going to pass it over to Jason to kick us off.
Thank you, Dan. Welcome everybody from all over. Good morning to those of you in the U.S. at least, if there's any abroad. But my name is Jason Pond. I am the Chief Expansion Officer at Grizzly Broadband. A little bit about me, my history. My first WISP wireless deployment was in 2001. Some very old gear for anybody in the room that may understand Orinoco or Cisco Aeronet. That was some of the stuff that we started with. I've been an owner or an operator in the industry since then. I've been involved in 4 different ISPs, multiple mergers and acquisitions. I've built a lot of fixed wireless, and starting in about 2015, I moved into building fiber, where we've been doing fiber and fixed wireless expansions, kind of all over Western Montana. For a period of time, I was down in Idaho. Today, my responsibilities lie around strategy and expansion. Grizzly Broadband was awarded $48 million of ARPA money from the state of Montana to build a fiber to the home network and expand our current network that we're operating. With that, though, it doesn't mean that we're only focused on fiber. We're paying attention to all of the different elements that are going on in the internet world and the broadband delivery world. We'll talk a lot about that today, where there are other things to pay attention to. And broadband is a very, very hot topic, which with hot topics comes lots of eyes. When I'm paying attention to strategy and expansion, we're not just looking at technology, but we have to pay attention to it and understand that just because we build fiber rapidly, and right now we're building it rapidly, it doesn't mean you're going to win. I've seen multiple instances where when you go into a new area and you might be the first fiber there, and another provider will come overbuild and you will lose customers. And you have to pay attention to that. This is not fiber is just a technology. And also same thing with wireless, right? It's just a technology. So if you want to be able to really hold down customers in the future, you're going to have to be a customer first company and not a technology first company. And I can't stress this enough, because I've watched and been involved with customers that have changed, whether I'm taking them or losing them on fiber. And we've even lost some of our, almost hooked up fiber hookups with somebody that could deliver just a little bit faster with a similar service. So, and that could be anything. It could be satellite. It could be another fixed wireless provider, any of those things. But in order to do it, you've got to be focused on customer first. One of the other things as you're looking into strategy and expansion that you've got to pay attention to is you've got to take a holistic approach. COVID really made times change, and the demand for broadband. We operators out there, we have the curse of knowledge. We understand that the importance of it. We use broadband every day as an operator of an ISP or a broadband network. The other side of it is now COVID took everybody remote and made this huge demand for broadband, reliable broadband services. And so there's residual change that's happening, and it's going to happen continuously in our industry, probably for the next 5 plus years. There is different legislation that's going to happen. States are doing their own thing versus you've got to pay attention to what the FCC is doing. So there are a lot of different ways that you've got to, and things you've got to pay attention to as we go forward. And the way that you're getting customers today is not the way that you're going to, at least I should say, the way that you want to get customers in the future or going to get customers in the future is not going to work the same as it has over the last few years. COVID created this big spike, in 2020 where everybody, if you were a provider, it was a heyday, right? You were feasting like crazy. Well, we're going into a season where now there's a lot more competition. There's a lot other things. We're dealing with satellites. We're dealing with and new satellite technologies that are starting to launch. We're dealing with other fiber providers. You've got all this grant money coming in. You've got other providers that are also building networks that aren't even grant funded. So there's billions and billions of dollars being dumped into our industry, and everybody's trying to gain that customer's attention. And you got fixed wireless in the carrier space, right? T-Mobile is a big player at this point. I'm sure those of you that watched the Super Bowl saw some of those Super Bowl ads. That was not to our advantage as operators. Last year during the Super Bowl, we got, as a small business operator, we kind of got a nugget where they advertised for small businesses during the Super Bowl. This year, we didn't see that. And we've got T-Mobile coming in hot and heavy. And the service is at least usable, right? Whether we could argue reliable, we could argue all back and forth about all of those things, but it's definitely a contender in the marketplace. And so as you're looking at the future, you've got to really pay attention to what's the next 3 to 5 years look like, and where do I want to be at beyond that? So, in order for us to secure this $48 million of funding, we started years before the idea of the money was even available. The network design for the system actually started clear back in 2019. And it was all based off of the vision that I wanted to build fiber to the home to my customer base. As I had acquired a company in Western Montana, and I wanted to take that wireless company and start the next upgrade. And it goes through there. So you've got to really start paying attention to what the future looks like. And you can't just keep fighting fires and putting out what tomorrow comes at. You're always going to have competition. How can you make your play best to it? So what's the timeline look like going forward? You got BEAD coming from the IIJA Act. And it's the timelines are here. And those of you that are going to some of the bigger conferences here, WISP America next month, there's a lot of discussion going around what this timeline looks like. I've been very involved with a lot of the timelines based off of it. Montana is kind of trying to stay ahead of the game. I can't say we're number one, but we're definitely getting up there. And so in 2023, this is your year to get your ducks in a row. You got to get your business in order. Those small operators out there, if you want to try to go for this money, which you can go for the money. You've got to start figuring out how you're going to do it. You need to be talking to the banks. You need to be figuring out getting them on board. It's an entire education process to be able to get a bank to buy in, but they will buy in, whether you want to do private equity, however you want to do, but you do have to come up with a 25% match. Just think of that, though, as 25 cents on the dollar. But the red tape that comes with all of this stuff is you've got audits. And audits sound big and scary and whatnot, and they're not as bad as you think. But the ducks you got to have in a row is you have to have policies and procedures in place in your company in order to pass an audit. That's really, auditors are there looking at risk management. Okay. That's their number one goal, is to look at what's the risk. Did that company go buy stuff that was, did you procure your stuff at the most effective rate? And I say the most effective versus the cheapest because it's not a matter of low bid wins. You do have control in what you're doing, but you've got to have policies in place. If you have the same person ordering equipment as receiving the equipment, as signing off that invoice was good, you have a risk problem, right? It needs to be handled by multiple people and signed off on, and there needs to be those policies in place, and those policies need to be followed by everybody. So even if you have billing things that go on where you're billing at one, if you're billing a customer one price and customer B a different price because they get a discount, that discount better be documented as to why that person's getting a discount. If you're giving your friends free internet, your parents or whatever those are, that you've got to document that stuff. That's the type of audit that what the auditors are going to look at, is how you're spending the money and how well you're running your business. So get your ducks in a row, reach out to some different firms, and start looking into that. 2024, that's the apply year, right? So that for a lot of places, that's the year that you're going to be able to go apply for the money and start building in 2025. And so in 2025, you think, oh, well, that's 2 years down the road. What's that going to do to my, I can't pay attention that far out. Well, you kind of have to. You kind of have to make a prediction and take a guess at what you want to do, what you can afford to do, and go for it. Or you can just continue to build what you're doing and hope that you continue to maintain customers. I know ISPs that have been in business for 20 years that I helped start 20 years ago. They're still in business today. They haven't done grant funding. They haven't done it, but they hit a ceiling and they stopped, and they've kind of shrunk down a little bit. And those ISPs have, they're still, successful to a point. It's all a matter of how big do you want your company to be and where do you want to go. That's point. Companies will die out. Netflix took out Blockbuster. Similar thing could happen in our industry. Not saying that it will, especially as long as you stay customer focused and go forward. So I believe that takes up my time, and I'll turn it over to Adair.
Points this morning, and I'm going to try to segue into some similarly good points, I hope. My name is Adair Winter. I guess technically the CTO, VP of Network Operations for AW Broadband. We've been doing this ISP thing for a little over 10 years now. I think it'll actually be 11 years in May, come to think of it. So been here, done that a little bit, made a lot of mistakes along the way, and we'll see if we can't give you some information to hopefully keep you from making some of the same mistakes that we made, right? Just a little bit about where it all began, right? So we founded Amarillo Wireless in May of 2012. In 2015, we added VoIP. 2018, we actually rebranded as AW Broadband because we were not just wireless anymore, and we were not just Amarillo and the surrounding area. And anybody that knows the Texas Panhandle at all knows that the Lubbock area and the Amarillo area don't really get along, and so if we were going to operate in other markets, we had to have something that got Amarillo out of the name. And then we also just weren't wireless anymore. We became a WISP, a cable operator, a fiber operator, and started deploying TV service, linear TV service, and actually had TV on cable plants and things like that. So that was a good, fun learning experience. And then, of course, in 2018, we also installed our first fiber customer. But just like a lot of people that are probably listening today, we had 0 customers, not a lot of experience, very little money in the very beginning. We were all self-funded. We didn't come in with deep pockets or anything. But despite that, I mean, we grew to around 5,000 subscribers in 2018. it's pretty rapid growth considering for most people. Um, and then in 2018, we did an acquisition, which is what got us those cable and fiber, a little bit of fiber plants, about 750 subs. So again, we were no longer a WISP at that point. We had all these other fun things to deal with to deliver the TV service and all that stuff. And sometime along in there, we also ended up becoming an RDOF recipient. So our network spans about 9,000 square miles of the Texas Panhandle. We've got a little over 80 team members, about 9,000 subs, 160 network sites, and 175 miles of fiber that we've deployed so far, which all sounds really great, right? But it seems like over the last few years, things are changing. So as Jason alluded to, we found that we actually just through the course of, I guess, events and history and things going around, there was just kind of a shakeup in the market. So we liked fixed wireless because it was super easy and quick to deploy, obviously cost effective over any kind of wireline service like cable or fiber. And even today, it still lets you reasonably deliver acceptable speeds, and of course fantastic MRC. And in a lot of areas for a long time, we were literally the best choice. I mean, we replaced an older wireless provider in our area who is still here, but they just didn't upgrade and didn't keep up with everything. And we were able to kind of secure a lot of their customers just because we were nimble, we were moving fast, we were offering a competitive product at a higher speed. And in some of these areas where we were having a lot of growth, people were moving into our areas. They were hungry for something. We were literally sometimes their only good option. But sadly, like I've mentioned, things kind of started to change pretty quick. You can see that, and I believe in real numbers here. I mean, this is just as bad as real as it gets, right? This is literally our growth year over year since 2014. And so you can see it's trended down a little bit, which, for a business owner is not something you really want to look at, right? But we kind of had some explosive growth in that 2014, 2015, really through 2018 time period when we did that acquisition. The only thing that was really good about this whole thing is that while our growth in the number of customers maybe wasn't quite as high, our revenue was up higher than what our actual subscriber numbers were. So we attributed some of this decline in growth really to a lot of competition. As Jason mentioned, I mean, there's just competitors and people in the space now that literally just didn't exist a few years ago. We're talking the likes of Starlink and other mobile operators offering internet and just new oncomers into the market. So it's to say it hasn't been a challenge is really probably an understatement. We always tell our team, every day is really a new day. I mean, we may learn some piece of information that completely changes the course of direction for some corner of the network because we were trying to get there before somebody else. So what we really noticed with a lot of these competitors is that really they were only marketing speed and price, right? I mean, you watch a commercial and it's all about get your 300 meg, get your gig for some low price, whatever it is. But really nobody was talking about service and support and or a local spin. And a lot of people do care about that, but obviously the dollar does talk, and people aren't just going to spend money willy-nilly. And I think a lot of this competition ended up really being kind of fueled by acquisition and government money. And really, for in a lot of cases, fiber was really the buzzword. I mean, it was like if you just said you had fiber, it didn't matter really what it was in some cases. That's what people wanted. And so we knew that there was ultimately going to be a shift from having to be heavy fixed wireless focused to focusing on getting fiber into the ground. The thing that was really good for us, I guess, sort of in the beginning was when we did this acquisition and we acquired these cable plants. We got pole attachment rights, and we got a lot of things that were kind of handed to us with that. And it really made it a little bit easier to step into the market than kind of start from complete scratch. We were able to take over some existing contracts that were really pretty good for us and kind of leapfrogged us into being able to just overlash some fiber on the existing cable plant, those kinds of things, instead of having to build it all fresh. Now, there are certainly challenges to going the other way with that, but for us, it really helped get us really deployed into a couple of towns that we could just move on pretty quickly, and we were able to move quicker than the big guys, and we've been able to kind of corner that market, and that's what's kind of been important. So another really important aspect that we kind of started focusing on a few years ago was kind of figuring out how to adapt and overcome, and what our niche was going to be. And really what that boiled down to for us was trying to find the quality customers, not just a quantity of customers, right? I mean, it's all fine and well to have a bunch of customers, but if they're not happy with your service and then they're going to badmouth you, that doesn't really do anything for your reputation. Another goal was really to just make sure that we were trying to get our ARPU up, right? So again, instead of just going out and selling to everybody who wants $10 internet, we want to go out to those people, sell our value, and figure out what other services we could offer to them, whether that's voice services, Wi-Fi, you know, basic networking needs inside their business or their home, and those kinds of things, and TV service, and bundle all that together into some kind of formative package that makes people want to use you, even if you're a little bit more expensive than the guy down the road. Another thing that really we realized that was going to have to be a necessity was that we had to build fiber in strategic areas. So we've really tried to focus on how do we identify areas that, you know, we're the biggest provider in the area, or we think that there's not going to be anybody who's going to be moving into that area, and kind of capitalize on it. But at the same time, we weren't going to abandon fixed wireless. I mean, there was still a lot of good mileage. I mean, there still is a lot of good mileage in fixed wireless. And at the end of the day, you kind of have to use the right tool for the right job to get those customers, right? So I think it's important for people to understand that, you know, all technologies are relevant. Just like Jason mentioned, I mean, you can use almost anything to service a customer. I don't care if it's an Ethernet cable, a piece of glass, a coax cable, wireless, whatever it is. You know, like, they're all relevant as long as you can figure out a way to capitalize on it and provide a good, solid, and reliable product for your customer. Then it really doesn't matter. However, it is obviously easier to use fixed wireless to grasp, you know, customers early. Um, Fixed wireless will kind of always be on the leading edge, and letting you get into those new or hard to reach areas where fiber really just wouldn't be feasible until maybe you become more established and get to a size where it makes sense to build that fiber into that area. So I think the real big takeaway from all of this is that I love fixed wireless, but if you don't start, you know, planning on building fiber, somebody else is going to. Whether they overbuild you because of, you know, government funding programs, as Jason mentioned in detail, or they just, you know, do their normal expansion. Really, you kind of got to make your goal to get there as quickly as possible. So I think kind of my final thoughts here, I kind of feel like I moved pretty quick, but is that in 2023, really the internet is absolutely essential, right? I mean, it's a part of our daily lives. Those of us who are ISPs definitely know how cantankerous people can get when they don't have their internet for various reasons. But I just think it's important to remember some simple do's and don'ts here. And there's a lot more do's than don'ts. I could probably thought a lot more about some don'ts, but I wanted to try to end on a more positive topic. So I think it's really important to remember that you really have to be flexible in your deployment strategy. It really doesn't matter what you use to get to those customers. Just get to them as quickly as possible, secure that money from that customer, and then keep them happy, right? And at the end of the day, you're just got to find your balance between, you know, what is fixed wireless good for, what is cable good for, where can I build fiber without going broke, because all of these technologies can really meet the needs of your customer, right? I mean, deployed properly, they'll work. And really, probably, if you're not planning on deploying fiber, you really have to be. I mean, that's really the end game here. I know those of us who started off as fixed wireless operators, we kind of don't really want to hear that. We preach wireless, 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 or fixed wireless, and it's kind of hard to think, well, I don't want to give that up. Well, I don't think you have to. I think you can find a good, happy medium between what you can use, what tools you can use to deliver deploy a quick service to get your customers in a particular area, and then make a bit bigger overall plan to eventually deploy fiber. Am I telling everybody to go out and buy a cable plant? I'm not sure that that's probably the best option for a lot of people. If it springboards you into being able to provide service to an entire town, or what have you, and get you pole attachment rights and those things, then certainly there are certainly good options for that. But it's definitely a different animal. You really have to hire a different skill set for those kinds of people. But if you can get your hands on one, I mean, I think we bought 5 cable plants for, well, it was significantly less than what it probably should have been, and just the IP address space alone that we got in the acquisition was worth more than what we paid for everything. And so, keep your ear to the ground, find those deals that may come through. But I think above all, what WISPs and small operators have always kind of been good at is you really have to provide exceptional customer support. At the end of the day, the customer just wants their stuff to work, right? And so the pivot here is that, I guess, the center of the pivot, if you will, has got to be that support. You may be pivoting from fixed wireless and trying to deploy fiber. All those kinds of things are where you need to be. But if you don't support it correctly, if you don't hire enough people to answer your phone and respond to emails, and have after hour support and do all the things that really the customers expect of you, you're kind of throwing a lot of it down the drain, if you ask me. And I guess, finally, kind of my one don't here is that if you just don't wait too long to move. I know I'm super bad about that. Everybody gives me a hard time. I actually have a note hanging up in my office on my computer monitor that says, "Hold on while I overthink this," because I'm notorious for that, and I embrace that sometimes because I want to make sure that we're making the right move. But if you see that opportunity and you don't take it, like I said earlier, somebody else will. It's just a matter of time, and you may or may not be as relevant as you once were if you don't take that opportunity and start making plans to figure out how to grasp some of this funding, um, borrow some money, build some fiber, whatever it takes. Start talking to people, get to the shows, bump elbows with people who've been there, done that. I mean, these are all things that kind of really uh, will push you in the right direction, hopefully, to grow and become, something that is probably going to be a more permanent staple. As I believe that, fixed wireless isn't going anywhere. I think it's going to be around for a long time. I think it's just going to be a lot harder. As I showed in my slides, it's one of those things where, times change, things happen. You've got to position yourself in such a way that um, you kind of can weather that storm, whatever the case may be. So I think really that's the majority of the points that I wanted to take. I'll turn it back over to Dan.
Great. Thanks, Adair. Jason, if you want to pop back in too. So we'll go to some questions. We have a couple of questions in the chat, but maybe just following off of Adair's last point. You said move fast while you can. And I'm curious both your thoughts on, is it too late? It's probably too negative, but given the FCC maps are out, is it too late now to get fiber in the ground to block funding over building areas? Or is there still an opportunity for people to try to do that quickly and preempt some of those subsidy dollars?
I don't think so. I mean, I think the time is now, though. You know what I mean? Like, you definitely don't want to be any later. Like Jason mentioned, 2023, 24, and 25 are going to be formative years for a lot of people, because just the amount of money that's fixing to flow is astronomical, right? So I believe that ultimately, sure, if you started a few years ago, you probably a little bit better off, but you certainly don't want to delay from here. Jason, what's your thoughts?
Yeah. So while the one FCC map is out, we're continuously updating it. And the BEAD is very specific in the sense that you cannot overbuild fiber with fiber. So if there's already fiber in the ground, it's a matter of just getting the information out. So could you still block stuff? Yes. But as we all know, fiber takes a lot of money, time, and energy to put in the ground. So but what you can't do, you will not be able to block any BEAD funding with fixed wireless unless it's in the either hybrid licensed or licensed space. So.
And is there particular speed limits as well? Like you have to achieve at least X.
Yeah,
100 rate.
100 down, 100 down by 20 up. So
yeah. Cool. All right. So a couple questions. One on the first one is the question, I guess, for Jason, but I'm sure Adair can comment too. Do you find that the claim speed is the only factor driving customers? What about reliability and other factors? I think we both touched right on this a little bit.
It's a great question, and the short answer, Adair hit some of it, but the short answer is no. That speed is not all that customers are looking for. Speed is what customers were trained to look for. Right. A customer wants simple, look, the customer is just trying to solve a problem and they want to burn as little calories to do it as possible. And so their problem is they want it to work. The other side of it is that they also want to know that you care as a company. Right. So if you've been an operator for 2, 3, 4 years, anything greater than a year, and you haven't gone back and touched any of those customers that you signed up 2, 3, 4 years ago, you're losing. You've got to maintain at least a minimum of an annual touch that just says, hey, how are you doing? It can be digital. It can be physical. It can, meaning stop by or call. Most everybody these days just want to operate by text, figure out how to do text message the legal way. And I won't go into any further than that. There are different catches and rules behind that. And I'm not going to give legal advice in this presentation because I'm not an attorney. But you've got to show that you actually care. That's really, a customer will stay with you through problems as long as they know they can get a hold of you, as Adair mentioned, that you've got support and you can take care of them. Because the other guys aren't doing that. The other guys, if they have a problem, they pick up the phone, you pick up the phone and you get voicemail or you don't respond and work through the solution. There are going to be those few that they just want the lowest price. And I encourage everybody that's on here, don't be in the market for the lowest price. If you're in a race to the bottom, you will lose because you cannot outbeat the big guys when in that race. It's not possible. It'd be like going up against Walmart. Granted, Amazon's doing it, but different specs. So pick your niche that you want to serve and do it at the absolute best possible way. And you may only get to be able to be 1,000 customers, and that might be okay. Just serve those customers in the best possible way you can, and you will continue to grow even as these big guys continue to come in.
Cool. One thing that I always think about in the support is obviously really important and service, but how do you communicate that at the buy decision time? Because it's kind of, the analogy I sometimes use here is BlackBerry focused so much on battery life, but when the iPhone came out, the reality was people got the shiny thing in front of them and they didn't think about battery life when they bought it, even though, the first iPhone's battery life was garbage, but that wasn't a buying time decision. It was kind of like a using time decision. And it kind of feels like support's like that too. So how do you communicate the value of that up front if it's so important? Or how do you communicate how good you are at it up front?
That's a really good follow-up on that side. And I'm not necessarily the best at sales. That's why I hire salespeople that are good at sales. But communicating it through the simple way to do it is you've got to make the customer feel like the hero. Okay. So you're not the hero in the story. You need to be the guide. The hero is actually one of the most weakest members of the story in any story that you go through. The guides are the ones. Look at Yoda and Skywalker. Right? It's a working through how you support the customer. A lot of these customers that are calling you because of a referral. That's a customer that you touched and you recently touched. And that's how you show that the support side is. You're not going to have to necessarily answer that question other than just showing the simple of, hey, this is what we provide. And then show up when the support call happens.
I definitely agree with that. I think for us on our side, we really, from the minute that the customer calls in, one focus that we really have, and we watch our metrics pretty closely, is that how quickly can you get that person on the phone with a human, right? Because maybe you call the big guys and maybe you wait 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, maybe longer, especially if it's a support issue. Typically seems to be that they'll answer maybe a new customer call before they might answer a support call. But we try to really focus on, getting that call answered with, in less than a minute. And typically it's, seconds from the time that they call in. And then once you've started that interaction with that customer, we're driving home the fact that, hey, we live here. I might live down the block from you. We live in Amarillo, whatever the case is, or we're in the Texas Panhandle. Things that, again, kind of the bigger guys can't say, to kind of give that customer a sense of, hey, I like the way this feels. It feels neighborly, it feels homely, whatever you want to call it. So we really drive that home. We've had several customers cancel lately that, they thought they were just getting a better deal and they wanted to do that. And literally within days, they're calling us back going, I should have never left. I should have never left. You guys, have such better, service and support. I was just trying to save a few dollars, and, here we are, hooking them back up after we've already uninstalled them and did that whole thing. But, we, at the end of the day, we look better. Maybe I won't even say maybe we're the heroes here, but we definitely try to, foster that attitude that you're a person, you matter. We want, and we want your business. It's not just, hey, pay us money. It's, again, all those other things I mentioned, that we're here, we live here, we work with you, those kinds of things. We just really try to preach that from day one.
Great, thanks. Another question from the group. Our company doesn't want to be dependent on government funding. Can ISP survive without doing so, given that the big competitors who get it will overbuild? Is this the end of people who don't take funding?
The simple answer is you're a provider today, aren't you? We're all competing against other providers, in the so is it going to be as easy? No. You're going to deal with it, and you have time. This BEAD funding isn't going to start hitting the market until 2025. There's ARPA funding, and you're going to be dealing with that right now, this year for sure. That was rapid response money, so the strings are a lot less, and the deployment requirements were a lot faster. BEAD is going to take more time, but I think today, no matter how you look at it, there's always going to be a small business. There's always the flower shop down the road. Flower shop's a bad example. Let's pick on something else. So we still have a small little clothing store in our town. Will it always be there? As long as the clientele and the owners continue to feed them, right? People don't necessarily go to buy from Amazon or go and drive into town. Now times are harder. It's not as easy for that clothing store or any of the retail stores. We actually have a retail store ourselves, which we've been able to grow it by 300% in the last 3 years. And we do very little. We don't do any online sales on that at all. It's all physical. So, the long and the short of it is yes, you can still be a viable operator, but the work is going to be harder, and you're going to have to think about it in a different way.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think you can exist without funding for sure. You just might exist in a different way than you do today. And I think, again, it's sort of just like I mentioned in the slides, adapt and overcome a little bit is going to probably have to be something that you got to be very aware of what's going on around you, where your niche is, how you're going to keep those customers that you already have, how are you going to acquire new customers? Because no doubt, if you don't have a provider now that's building on top of you, and you're kind of the only one, you probably feel pretty good. The moment that changes, your perspective is going to look a lot different. Am I saying to run out and go get government money? At that point, it's probably too late. It's either that, or you got to continue to find out where you can operate, how you can operate, in order to combat that. But there'll always be competition, whether it's government funded or not. The hope will be that whoever might try to build on top of you would be that they just do a worse job of supporting that customer than you do. So again, I think if you can keep people happy, then they'll stick with you. But it's not going to be the only reason they stick with you. They're going to go try the cheap guy. They're going to try to get a deal. And then hopefully they find out sooner than later that, man, this wasn't really what it was cracked up to be. Maybe I want to go back to the previous provider or whatever. Your marketing strategies all have to change. I mean, everything kind of just becomes a little bit different animal once you end up in that same position. But I don't believe it's necessary. I think your landscape's going to look a lot different if you don't, to some extent.
Thanks. So, Jason, you mentioned earlier the CBRS as maybe a way of preventing overbuilds. So there's a specific question here about how does the CBRS and 5G fixed wireless compare to fiber? Do you feel like that's competitive? Is that something you're going to do, or is it just fiber wherever possible? And
yeah, so I've been in the industry for 22 years now. We build fiber. We use fixed wireless to bridge a gap. And we can get into technological arguments all day long, but a fiber is an isolated conduit between point A and point B. Wireless is not. Wireless is exposed to the interference of the world. So it's when you break it down to those levels, there's not really anything you can do to compete with the capabilities that fiber allows you to do. And there's all kinds of crazy fun stuff you can do now that you couldn't do 5 years ago. And so the short of it, does it compare? No, in my opinion, it doesn't. At the end game, if you're trying to, and just go to the point, I want to supply a full gig symmetrical at 5 milliseconds of latency back to my head end. Okay. You can't do it on you can't do it on a wireless network, because the jitter, what I didn't comment on there is jitter needs to stay under a millisecond, right? I want to be able to produce audio and video in two separate locations, and or have it managed similar to this where we've got, but you can see the inconsistency even in this presentation on some of it, and some of that's processing power of the computers we're using, and some of it's not. But
well, even my cable at home, which is reasonably fast, does not achieve those latency and jitter targets.
And so in order to do remote stuff very, very accurately, you've got to have low jitter. In a wireless network, that's not possible. It's you're always going to have those occasional spikes, but for the standard residential user, that's not what they need, right? Mm-hmm. They need it to just function. And they don't want to see any dropouts or cutouts or anything like that when they're on a Zoom call. And a lot of these residential users are doing Zoom calls or Teams and whatnot, and they're at home doing it. Luckily, our advantage today as a provider, what I'm noticing is people blame Teams for the problems. that, and not necessarily the provider, but if you have one glitch and it's a Teams problem and they say, all back to my internet provider because their Netflix didn't work last night, those are things that you've got to pay attention to. So
I think for us, if I can touch on the CBRS deal a little bit, is it a replacement for fiber? I don't believe it is. Are we deploying it because of the licensed aspect of it? Yeah, we kind of are. It's kind of our non-line of sight solution, but it's really just a stopgap for ultimately what we want to do to be able to get into a potential area where maybe we're not today, and hopefully we'll get fiber tomorrow.
Cool. So this is great. We're running out of questions. Running out of time, but not running out of questions. So maybe just quickly, there's a question about from Stephen about federal funding. So being a federal funding winner, being a federal funding winner, we are considering ignoring BEAD due to the strings attached by the Fed. Issues like future price controls, cybersecurity requirements, and other programs that may be attached to the money. What are your thoughts on BEAD? Is it going to be worthwhile to compete? Seems like it's a race to the bottom. So. Yeah, quickly, should people do BEAD or not?
Your choice, right? Are there strings like this attached? Yes. I don't believe there's going to be future price controls. You will always have to have a low cost option. Period. That's different though than a price control. And then you've got to be the cybersecurity requirements. Pay attention to it. It's nasty and can be ugly, and you've got to look at them. So you got to weigh it. Do you have the resources? And if you don't, build it into the funding mechanism, right? So that's what I was talking about, looking at it very holistically of all the parts and pieces. And remember, not everything is funded by it. Like sales and marketing are not part of this stuff. You have to be able to take that out of your own capital, out of your own expenses, and not that only the capital build portion is able to be reimbursed at that 75 cents on the dollar. So
yeah, Adair, any thoughts on that?
I think he nailed it.
Yeah, cool. Okay, awesome. Thanks, guys. So one area that we, in our kind of pre-chat to this session, we were talking, I think, Jason, as you and I, talking a little bit about how it's harder to get customers now, and the things that worked pre-COVID and pre-pandemic don't seem to work as well now. I wonder if there's if Adair, if that's your experience and what we have for techniques or tools that may be overcoming that, or even maybe a discussion of what we think the root cause of that behavior change is.
Honestly, I think the economy is driving a lot of it. There's just a lot of competition. There's a lot of everybody's dollars getting stretched and pushed in a lot of different ways and areas. It's just a different mentality that you have to have today in order to operate. Again, you kind of have to focus, or we focus on selling that value to the customer, because I refuse to be the bargain basement guy. I refuse to be the first one to race, to $0 internet. Does that probably hurting our growth somewhat? Maybe. But I refuse to kind of drop the quality in order to just get the quantity and have a big customer count. So yeah, today things are a lot different. The majority of, I think, what we see is people, just trying to save a buck and get, the best value they can. There's obviously those that are going to be out there that just want the speed, or they want something else. That the vast majority of the reasons why we see people move to a different provider would be that they're offering some kind of promotion or special. So how you combat that, it's going to be very specific on how you are marketing your company today. I don't think there's a one size fits all approach to this, frankly. What do you think, Jason?
I totally agree with you, Adair. And I'll reiterate that never be in a race to the bottom. Are you going to win every customer? The answer is no. You have to be okay with that but as a business owner, you have to be okay that you cannot serve. No is an acceptable answer. That, hey, we can't do that. You're not going to be a customer. Cut out your people that always want discounts or always want a discount. If you discount a product by 10%, it costs you way more than that. That's what you don't realize. You're not looking at the amount of money that it costs you to set that you have to set that discount up. And some of you are looking at me right now and you're saying, well, it takes me 2 seconds inside of the software. Okay, now 20x your company and tell me how long it takes. It's completely different when you start to go at scale. So have your systems, your processes in place. Sell to pick your niche that you want to be in, and then make your customer the hero in the story, right? So there's that type of marketing is what is currently winning. You can see it across, starting to trickle into our industry. And if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, you can catch up with more of the stuff I'm coming out with here in the next few months. But I won't go into it today with that stuff. So.
Cool. So a couple more minutes. We will stop before 11. It's come up a couple times, the ops side. So the ops is the unsexy part of all of this, like the processes, the controls, the all that stuff that's under the hood that makes everything run and scale. Both of you have gone through a lot of growth. Any like parting words on how to make that happen, how to operationalize things across billing, across technical? I know, Jason, we've talked a lot in the past about standardization is the most important thing, or commonality anyway. But yeah, any last words or recommendations for people going through that change, especially as they get ready for funding and they're going to get audited?
It's lather, rinse, repeat, and the repeat is an audit. So systems and processes that you're going through, if you how you market to a customer, how you close a sale, how you set them up in your CRM software. You should be using a CRM software. QuickBooks is not a CRM software. You should be have that all written down. Documentation sucks. I hate it. I mean, I'll be straight up. It
No
is
one likes that.
Worse. But there's this fun little tool out there called AI that, and there's multiple. I won't go into any of the specific brands of AI, but there are lots of audio translators where you can talk into a microphone and translate it into audio. You can use some of the newer interfaces that are out there. Use that to your advantage to create documentation, create systems and processes. So when you hire somebody, that common thing that I find in the world of hiring and firing, it's way cheaper to hire and train and then fire and replace. Hire the right people for the company that fit your company culture, have a company culture, build systems and processes, document them along the way so that they're easily trainable, continue to scale it up and adjust them as the course adjusts. They're guardrails, not laws. Okay. So use them as guidelines and figure out, okay, bring it up quarterly, annual, at minimum annually, and say, hey, is this process still work? Does our marketing process still make sense? Does our sales process still make sense? How's our cash flow? All of our billing, our accounting, all of those different systems and processes that you should have in your company, do they all make sense? And if you're a solopreneur, you're just getting started, or if you got 2 or 3 people, it still makes sense. Do you have to have as many meetings as say Adair or myself in our companies? No. You might be able to meet every other week, once a month, stuff like that. But there are tools out there and there are systems out there that you can apply to your company that will help you scale rapidly.
Thanks.
Adair? I think if I may quickly, I think that for us, we've made some really good hiring decisions, and our core management team is really invested in the company. They nearly treat it as their own, even though they may not hold an ownership position. They functionally act like it every day, and they try to keep that in mind. And so maybe we're good at that, at teaching that culture. Maybe we just got lucky and hired the right people. I'm not really sure. Maybe it's a combination of all of it, but I think operationally, as Jason said, you're documenting your processes so that you can remove and replace somebody, and they have a consistent, document, a role to follow, example to follow. And it seems like, I will say, the number one thing that I hear from people in the industry is they're like, they want to grow, they have a desire to grow, but they can't find people. They can't find good help, kind of a thing. And it's really probably one of the most important things that I can think of that you could do as a business, is finding people that you can bring into the fold who you can trust to run your operation, so that you don't have to do everything and run yourself ragged. I think we've probably all been there at some point in time. It's not fun. It's not always fun to have to pay those people, but it's a necessity, sadly, of doing business. I always joke. I tell people, if we didn't have to deal with customers and employees, this would be a lot easier. But that's kind of what we signed up for. So here we are. If you could find you some good help, get your processes documented, I think you're going to be better off moving forward as a company.
Great. Thank you, guys. We're right up against the clock. Thanks for your insights. I hope everyone got value out of that. I know I certainly did. I had a long list of questions that, as you guys were talking, and we kind of ran out of time. So maybe we'll figure out some way in the future to get back to those as well. So again, thank you so much for being generous with your time. I hope everyone got something out of that, and thanks for joining.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks.